Okay, so they want to do a big epic story about the adventures of Galadriel. That should actually be a really cool idea. Um, yeah, okay, so she didn't technically go on any big epic adventures in the lore, but that's okay. That's a really cool idea. Fans would be very forgiving of inventing some new story just to see Galadriel go on some awesome adventures because she's actually a really awesome character. That would be awesome to see. Except for, wait, what did they do here? They got her wrapped up in androgynous looking armor and made her into a fighter, and oh, and she's on some sort of angry quest for vengeance. And when Elrond tells her to put up her sword, she's all like, "What else could I do?" And what the hell? Who is this person? This is not Galadriel. Uh, yeah, yeah. The Adventures of Galadriel should have been a really easy win for Amazon. It would have been awesome to see, but what the hell have they done? It's this doesn't. This is just a tired cliche we've seen 100 times before. It's basically some sort of angry feminist stereotype. What are we doing here, folks? If you think the only way to make a woman strong is to wrap her in armor and have her act like a man while waving some phallic symbol around, then you do not know women and you do not know power. And you sure as hell can't understand feminine power. Going all the way back to the most ancient archetypes, the feminine has always been associated with the mystical and the magical. In ancient paganism, there's this idea of the maiden, the mother, and the crone, a sort of feminine trinity of magic. And Mother Earth itself is, well, Mother Earth, it's Gaia, it's like this goddess that sustains the planet. And in modern Catholicism, the idea of the Virgin Mary is like considered to be the Queen of Heaven. And in the astrological zodiac, the sign of Scorpio, notoriously a sign of power and mystery and sometimes quite terrifying, is a feminine sign. Nowhere in the history of Earth has feminine ever been associated with weakness until we get to modernity. In our numb and dumb modern culture, where we have no understanding, our intuition is lost, the magic is lost. We don't believe in mysticism, we don't believe in mystery, we don't believe in gods or goddesses of any kind. We're just this mundane rationality and this cold secular atheism. And of course, if you embrace that kind of soulless ideology, then, well, of course, all you're going to see in women is these weaker versions of men that it seems like nature itself has conspired to oppress them. And of course, you become bitter about these natural differences. And of course, the only recourse seems to be to reduce the differences by, feminizing men and making women act more masculine. And because there's no other way you can bring balance to this terrible order. So, of course, if you're going to write a female character in a fantasy story, the only possible female ideal you can think of is woman in armor waving a sword around like some dude. And of course, if there's other dudes in this fantasy, you better make them look more feminine so they don't steal her thunder. And that's exactly what Rings of Power has done. Because after all, it was Elrond who was the badass soldier and the commander of the armies of Gil-galad. And it was Galadriel who was more of a strategist and politician type character. But of course, I had to swap those roles because we can't have like a male warrior actually clouding up the female badass she's going to be now, because since she's taken the male role, because there's no other way they can think of making her powerful other than just swapping places with the dude, because they don't know female power. Because female power is something that requires wisdom to understand. Male power is fundamentally childish, because all you gotta know is strength and ego. So sure, if you want your strong female characters to be all childish and egotistical and basically unrelatable narcissists, then go ahead. Make them all act like men. But guess what? When male characters act like that, no one likes them either. except for in the most shallow ways. Any male character who's supposed to become relatable, an actual hero, has to learn to stop acting like that and learn to actually, grow up. Female energy, female power, is just far more sophisticated by nature. Yeah, and it's harder to write. It's easy to write childish characters when you're just a child. Adult characters, sophisticated characters, wise characters, requires a wise author. So maybe some no-name showrunners who've never done anything before, who don't even understand the content of the writings of Tolkien, maybe they shouldn't be writing this kind of character. They shouldn't be taking on something that's just over their heads. Tolkien, when he wrote this stuff, had an awful lot of life experience under his belt there. He was a war vet. He was an English professor. He's well versed in literature, language, religion, and mythology. He wasn't just writing comic books when he made The Lord of the Rings. He wasn't just writing shallow entertainment when he put together the Silmarillion. There's a reason why the idea of being a Tolkien scholar is a real thing. There are schools, actual classes on Tolkien and learning his mythology, because it's kind of deep. Now, of course, there are other types of feminine archetypes. Not all females act the same way. There is the archetype of the female warrior. I mean, that is a thing. And that's why Tolkien wrote Éowyn. He has a whole character archetype for that, too. If they wanted to do the further adventures of Éowyn, that could have been interesting, I guess. But they were trying to write Galadriel. So writing Galadriel by writing her as someone else who's completely different means you're not actually writing Galadriel. It means you're writing someone else who's completely different because you do not understand Galadriel. But of course, while we're on the topic, the feminine sage and the warrior woman, of course, are not the only two female archetypes either. The two things do not negate each other. There is a crossover. A female can, sure, act like a masculine warrior, and of course there's the female sage, but there's also such thing as the feminine warrior, because they're not mutually exclusive. Ever heard the term mama bear? Yeah, the mother archetype. It can be violent, very much so. Bears are dangerous. In fact, in nature, all mamas are fairly dangerous. We sometimes stereotype the, angry male as like, oh, he's behaving like an animal. We forget that mama is also an animal. This ultra masculine and the mother are both primordial archetypes. They're warriors. They're fighters. But the mama bear, the feminine warrior here, is a whole. It is its own distinct thing. Now, Tolkien didn't have any major mother characters in his writings, but if we step outside of the works of Middle-earth for a moment, there is a good example of this in the character of Ripley from the Aliens movie. The kind of climactic final scenes of that movie where she faces off with the alien queen. See, that's not your just stereotypical dick measuring contest of macho man versus macho man beating each other up to see who wins. That's the battle of the mamas. Each of Ripley and the alien, each in their own way, kind of protecting their children. The exception, of course, is that the alien's children is trying to eat everybody, but that's a separate issue there. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make here is that feminine energy is powerful energy, and if the only way you know how to make a powerful female is to make her masculine, then you don't know female, you don't know power, and you might be a misogynist of some kind. But returning to our original question of how would an Adventures of Galadriel story look and how could it be done right? Well, we can look what's already been done. Look at how she was portrayed in the movie The Hobbit, where she took on Sauron in a little mage duel kind of thing. Or, look at how Gandalf was portrayed in the whole Lord of the Rings. And imagine Galadriel doing that. It's kind of her thing, to being the wise sage. She could have gone, and the tactician, the smart one, the one who runs around and helps other people know what to do. And when things get intense, she can whip out a spell and some magic, and occasionally even pull out a sword. That would have been cool looking. Think of how Gandalf was and how Galadriel was in The Hobbit and that sort of thing. We also know this as being the sorceress. And, and to think of it in Dungeons and Dragons terms here, okay? This is a fantasy world. Not everyone has to be the front lines fighter or barbarian. You can be in the back lines as a sorcerer or the wizard. And everyone knows the late game spellcasters are way more powerful than the fighter anyway. And a show about Galadriel being like that, being like Galadriel, in a story written by people who actually care about these things and understand these things, that would have been cool to see. But that's not what we're getting, because that's not the kind of people Amazon hired to do this. So, enjoy your tired, angry feminist, androgynous warrior cliche. But you can enjoy it by yourself, because I'm not watching that show.